Joining me right now is the man himself, William Patrick Corgan. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Always happy to talk to the people of Canada.
It's nice to talk to you. I was saying to you before we turned the microphone on that song caught me off guard when I heard it, because I knew you guys were putting out new music, but I didn't expect it to sound like that. And I legitimately heard it on the radio and legitimately turned it up and legitimately tried to figure out who it was. You know what I mean? It's a nice feeling.
Yeah, I love it. Sometimes I have the thing where I'll hear a song in the radio and I'll think it's me. That's when you know you're getting a little too old. You hear a song, you think, did I do that? Sometimes it is me, and sometimes it's not. I've had that experience.
It's a busy time, right? I mean, most people I'm talking to are, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their time. But I look at you got a new double album out today. You're putting out multiple music videos, an entire animated series, recording the next album, remixing and remastering your old album Machina, recording a sequel to Mellon Collie that's over 30 songs long, planning a Mellon Collie themed tour, owning a tea shop, running a wrestling organization, taking care of 2 kids under 6. I think that's everything, right?
I'm sure there's something else in there. My spiritual journey. I think you missed that one. Yeah, but no, it's very busy, and that's been my way of dealing with the stress. Is just keep moving.
Are you someone who has a hard time with free time?
Many people through the years, when they saw me unhappy, which I'm not particularly unhappy now, but when they saw me unhappy, would say, you need a life change, or you need to go on a vacation or something. And I would try to explain to them that the only way for me to really have a life change would be to absolutely completely quit the music business. Like I feel like I'm in the mob or something. Like when I'm in it, I'm very uncomfortable, but outside of it, I'm quite normal. So yeah, it's like, it's an in or out feeling, but when I'm in it, it's very hard for me because I just feel like time is such a precious commodity. And I think that's why with the band kind of back on its feet after a long time, I'm trying to crank out as much stuff as possible because I don't count on tomorrow.
Am I onto something in the introduction I did there when I talked about how you're interested in sometimes surprising your audience, or you're interested in not doing the same thing over and over again? I mentioned David Bowie and Neil Young in the introduction. I know last time you were here, you and I talked about Neil Young a lot. Is there something about that unpredictability that attracts you?
To take your question in a slightly different direction, I used to think that way. I used to think that I was in that mold. And of course, both those men, David and Neil, who I both got to be around at different times, were great inspirations to me. But I actually think that's a bit of a baby boomer concept that needs to be let go of. I think I'm actually, when I really look at it, I think I'm more in the guise of where we are in modernity, which is, don't tell me how to live. Don't tell me who to be. I just want to be whoever I am. And if I decide I want to be a cat one day and a dog the next, then that's just who I am. I think that's more where we've evolved to. I think the idea that you have a set identity and then you have to kind of struggle and wrestle within that identity is actually an idea placed on us by our parents. Basically the post-war generation kids, the baby boomers, as we call it. I think modernity tells us that we should live our best life, and if it means we're a mountain climber one day and a gardener or a baker or a nurse the next, I think that's what life really always should have been, or probably maybe was at one point, and we got lost in the post-industrial idea of like, you had to get a job, you had to have a role, and then the songs of the Springsteens of the world about struggling against that sort of set identity that you came into life with, the working class, the classist sort of thing. And I actually think we're shaking off those bounds now. And so I actually see myself as part of more of a futuristic position than in the lineage of the guys that I grew up on.
I hear what you're saying there. And I would add also that I think audiences have changed as well, not just the people who are making the art, but audiences have less restrictions on what they expect from artists, or audiences. I think there may have been a time where if, say when Bob Dylan went electric, audiences were so expected to Bob Dylan singing protest and folk songs, and they reacted perhaps poorly when he didn't. I think audiences are ready for anything now too.
If you really look at it, it's actually kind of a strange negative, because the artists that we all grew up on were put in a position that how they marketed themselves, or how they allowed themselves to be marketed, was the key to their success. And the pop stars of today are basically proving that's an irrelevant point. if you're a fan of Lady Gaga, you're a fan of Lady Gaga. You're not a fan of her in one guise or the other. And I think that's an evolved position. And that's what I mean about shaking off that balance. Like somebody like Lady Gaga, who's a great talent, defines her world. The world doesn't define her. And I think that's actually more commensurate to happiness. And that's what I mean about a kind of post-industrial position. It's like you've got to kind of get in this lane, and this is the way you want to march if you want to kind of maximize your opportunity here. And I think that those days are over, honestly.
It sounds like it's a better time to be releasing music even than when Smashing Pumpkins first started.
I think personally, we're about to have a music explosion that will shock everybody. You're seeing a kind of a return to democratization.
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis the internet and streaming services, where people just listen to what they want to listen to. And of course, the markets start to figure out, oh, you're a fan of Americana. Let me give you more of that. Hey, check out this artist, support this artist. Artists are getting to the point where, a friend of ours, Katie Cole, who appears on the record, who's a singer-songwriter from Australia, she's building a business for herself. She doesn't need to operate within the normal, halls of the record company, record companies. It's like she can define herself whoever she wants to be. And that's the world I'm happy to help build. And yeah.
So how does that manifest itself when you go into the studio? Can you just broadly give me, when you get back into making music with Smashing Pumpkins, I guess, how do you begin making a record like the one you're putting out today?
Well, a little bit of context. We made a record a few years ago with Rick Rubin, which was kind of our We're Back Together record.
Yeah.
And originally it was supposed to just be one song. And Rick talked us into doing 8. And then that kind of turned into an album, which really wasn't an album. It was more like a document of a session. So this was the first time we were back in the way that we used to be, where we would go in for months and we would just mine out material and we would kind of pick a lane and we'd go down that lane musically. In this case, the bar that I set was, look, we've got to make contemporary music. I'm not interested in making music that sort of echoes who we used to be. Those forces don't exist anymore, and we're not even those same people. So let's just make the best music that we can make together today in a contemporary frame. Let's be competitive. Let's get in the mix. And if we lose, we lose. That's fine. But like this idea of sort of living in the shadow of who you used to be is actually quite boring, honestly. And what's interesting is we're making a new record. You referred to it briefly, this kind of sequel record to Mellon Collie Machina. We're probably more who people would expect us to be on this record, the record that's coming out next, because we've kind of broken through into another space, and now we feel comfortable with sort of engaging all of our faculties. It doesn't make sense. It's like we don't feel like we owe anybody anything, and the minute we don't feel like we owe anybody anything, we go back to doing what we're known for. It's like a strange psychological trick.
But I also know that sometimes barriers can be great for creativity. If you set yourself around a barrier that I'm going to write this kind of thing, I'm going to write this kind of book, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to give myself these limitations, you can sometimes be, if not more inspired, if not make better art, but at least do something different than you are if you have total freedom. So when you sat down with the band, you said, I just want to make the best kind of music we can make today. Let's not go down a particular path. How did that go over?
Oh, they're fine with it. Basically their thing has always been great is if I write great songs, they'll support me. If the songs aren't so great, they're not really sure what to do. You know what I mean? Like they there's that old saying, you can't shine a turd, So it's kind of up to me to write the songs that will sort of move the meter for us into a different territory. Once I do that, they get in behind me and they push and they make everything better. And so that's been our greatest formula for success is they're super supportive of whatever I want to do, but they sort of need me to bring my best to the table. They can't, they're this in the conversation we're having, they're not visionary artists. You know what I mean? They're not those type of artists. They like what they like. And they require me to bring them into a different territory, to push them to require different things of themselves. And that's the way we've always worked.
Yeah, and I've been reading about that evolution. That and you don't have to talk about this too much because you've talked about it an awful lot. But I have been really interested to read about that evolution of the band being a band to people having to be comfortable with the fact that like, here's the thing that I do, here's the thing that Billy Corgan does, and here's the thing that we're going to do as a band, and that people seem to want that I can make by myself, and the sort of adjustment of roles that had to happen within there. I did find that interesting to read about.
Are you referring to the interview with Kevin Parker?
Yeah.
From Tame Impala. Yeah, because we talked a lot about that because he'd struggled with the same circumstances in his group early on. He kind of did a lot of the work, And then, but he was still loyal to the guys that he was in the group with, and so there were those tensions, and eventually they were able to resolve them, best as I can tell. And I went through a similar thing, when I was at 19 years old and we were all in the band together, or 20 years old or whatever, in my mind, it was a democracy. And it was the situations around us that made us not be a democracy. I wasn't a natural leader. I'm a Pisces, for God's sake. Like, the last thing I want to do is argue about something. But then somebody would sit down and say, okay, you've got to do this, or you've got to jump over this bar. And I go, well, I can do that, and then I look it over, it's another one of my bandmates, and they'd say, call me at noon. I want to sleep in, it sorted itself out over time. And then of course that caused a lot of stress, which we had to grow up in and figure out. And now that we've been together, in different guises for over 30 years, even if you just want to call it a family, I think we've all figured out, oh, he's really good at that. He's really good at that. Let everybody just get on with what they're good at. And I think you can hear the results on the record. We feel quite comfortable with one another.
I'm happy you used the word family there, because I want to play another track off the record. Take a listen to this. This is Q. I'm Tom Power. What you're hearing right now is the song Witch from the brand new Smashing Pumpkins album Sear, which is out everywhere today. I don't think I'm giving away any spoilers, but whose voice is that at the top of the record?
That's my son Augustus.
That's lovely.
He's very excited to be on a record. He likes hearing that part only.
On loop.
Yeah.
What is it like to have your kids on this record?
My partner and I, Chloe, talk about it a lot. Because like any parent or parents, we struggle with, balancing our responsibilities in life with our responsibilities as parents. And what we've kind of settled on over time is the best way we can teach our children and lead our children is to have robust, busy lives that we're happy in. And then the children kind of float in and out of those situations. So when we have a tea house outside of Chicago, Madame Zuzu's, and when Chloe's there baking, the kids will be there with her in the kitchen, now they might be sitting there on a phone watching Paw Patrol, but they're with her, they're in the environment. I was the same way with my father. My father was a musician. So my father took me to rehearsals and sound checks, and I was expected just to sit there and, nurse a Coke while he sound checked for 2 hours. And that's the way we teach our children. It's like our lives are their lives. There's no separation at all.
How would you feel if one of your children came to you eventually and said, I think I want to be in the music business too?
I probably have a very similar talk to the chat my father had with me, although when he gave it to me, I had a very bad reaction. He didn't want me to go in the music business because he thought it was a very hard life. And then in a negative way, he didn't think I had the talent to succeed in it. So he basically thought I was setting myself up for failure and a lot of heartache. The only talking to they would get would be if I thought they were going to hurt themselves somehow, or what they were going to do was ultimately going to hurt them. But I would, at the end of the day, I would respect their choice. At least I hope to. We're not there yet. They're only 5 and 2.
Well, how about you? I mean, we talked a little bit about your kids here, but like, how about you? How have you changed artistically? There's a big difference between being 19 years old and now being a bit grown up with youngsters. Do you think it's changed you artistically?
I mean, having children or just getting older?
Being a father.
I think the most salient point there would be, I don't want my children seeing me dejected or burnt out or, pick your word, humiliated or, it's a very hard business. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know. The entertainment business is a very hard business on the soul. It asks things of you that are oftentimes ridiculous. And so my thing is, I don't want my children seeing me beaten down by something. I want them seeing me successful and engaged and happy and proud. I think that's the best way I can teach them. So I try not to do anything that I can't stand behind, if that makes any sense.
Part of my guest, by the way, is William Corgan. The Smashing Pumpkins' new album, Sear, Shining and Oh So Bright, is out everywhere today. So even when you're not promoting a new album, you're always in touch with your fans. We were on your social media, and we were really struck by how much you interact with the fans of Smashing Pumpkins. And our producer, Mitch, who's producing this right now, he's been part of the Q&As, and he's been jumping in and submitting questions. And you've been holding these Q&A sessions almost every night. And that's not access that a lot of artists give. So just broadly, why is that important to you?
Well, on a very kind of simple level, as someone who's been portrayed by the media in a particular way, what I heard over and over through the years was, wow, you're not the person that I read about.
How are you portrayed?
I mean, I don't know, pick your, crazy, insane, tyrant, a lot of things, you know what I mean? Now, are some of those things aspects of my character? I could say so, but I don't think you can be a successful artist for 30 years if you're insane. Clickbait articles, a lot of stuff like that. So I found that by kind of doing my own media and talking to those people that are engaged with me every day, they kind of surreptitiously become part of the story and correcting the record and creating a narrative, which, we live in a world of narratives. I mean, you only have to look at the political sphere to understand how narratives are incredibly important to how people come to their decisions. That by creating a kind of more positive narrative around myself in communion with those people who really support me on a daily basis, that we can tell a different story. And it goes back to what I was saying. Like, I grew up in a time where you had to go, you had to talk to the New York Times, you had to talk to Spin or whoever. And if they hit you upside the head, you had to take it because you needed those people to tell people that you had a new record out. Now we live in a time where you don't really need those people. And the rules around that type of engagement is changing. And so I think by doing your own media and communicating directly and being willing to be an imperfect person, which I am, because I can be petty and I can be silly, in equal parts. People come to their own decision about who you are, and they come to their own decision about whether or not they want to be loyal to your cause. And it's created a completely different atmosphere around us. It doesn't always work. I would say it only works 8 times out of 10. But the 8 times out of 10 it works, I think it's been a positive boon to what we're trying to accomplish, which is, it's a musical business here. We run a musical business. We don't run a drama business. We don't run a clickbait business. We run a music business. We write songs and we produce records and we do concerts. And as long as people are supportive of that, we get to do more of that. That's all we've ever asked for.
I feel a sadness. I'll say I'm new to this game here of doing work like this and interviewing people. And I've been really fortunate to have had really lovely interactions with people that have been portrayed a certain way to me in the past. And I'll include you in that. I didn't know too much about how you were portrayed, but you were nothing but generous and kind to me when you came on before. And I just think it's so sad. And I don't even know if this is a question, but I feel so sad when I look at like the musicians of your generation when you first started out, be it you and say like Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam or like Kurt Cobain from Nirvana. I have a certain story about them because of what I've read about them or movies I've watched about them or TV shows about what I've watched about them. And it doesn't underline the actual humanity of them, that these are 3-dimensional, full-figured people, and the story around them is one that is being told to me, if that makes sense. It makes me very sad.
Yeah. Okay. Like let's take a quick jump in on say Kurt and Eddie, right? Both incredibly talented people. And at a very young age, probably before they knew who they really were, they're assigned a sort of role in the world. They of course are smart people. They figure out the role that they're assigned and they either fight it or they go along with it. But it's not really in line with who they are as people, 24 hours a day. It's a sort of a press narrative, or it's pushed by a record company because it's good for record sales or whatever. And that's what I mean. That's a world that's crumbling, and it's crumbling quite quickly. And so that's the shame of it, is it particularly for Generation X, particularly a generation that was the first generation to enter into the internet age, with AOL chat rooms in 95 and stuff like that. We didn't know what we were walking into. We walked into these buzzsaws of an expectation. I used to call it the unchecked id. People's inner thoughts run amok. When all you are was some kid in a basement with a dream, and you just, I hope I can play Saturday Night Live one day or something like that. It gets a lot more complicated. And what I'm trying to say in so many words is it gets complicated for reasons that are beyond you. If you really think about it, the things that beguiled Generation X, Kurt, Eddie, myself, Courtney, Trent Reznor, whoever from our generation, really didn't have anything to do with us. It was somebody else's narrative. It was some other generation's narrative of what success was or accomplishment was, or, you know what I mean? And what's funny, it's all fallen away. And what is remaining? The music. That's the funny part. The same reason that people engaged in the first place is the reason that people are still listening. It's just the music.
Well, I'll say the music and the impact of the music, because, when you do these Q&As, Billy, like, you have people talking to you about how your music helped them through losing loved ones, or, attempting to die by suicide, failed marriages. The impact of the music is still there. And that's also not something you can get from the old model so directly. That must be very rewarding for you.
Well, the way I look at it is, I can't say when music started, but let's say it's 4,000, 5,000 years old. Well, for, 99% of those years, up until the last century or so, music was basically a one-to-one causal relationship. You hired a band to play your wedding, or you saw a guy on a street corner and you threw a coin in his hat. It was very much a street language thing. It was very much the musicians were intertwined with the culture. And only through technology, like they talk about how Bing Crosby was the first guy to take advantage of the microphone, that, everybody up and before Bing Crosby was this massive voice, like, oh, like an opera singer. And Bing figured out how, by using the microphone, by getting close to it and singing intimately, he engaged an audience in a different way. And he became, at that point, the biggest selling record seller of all time, I think up until Elvis. So the point is the technology changed the relationship to the star, and they put them on a pedestal, of course, with the movies too. And they learned quickly to sanitize their images and airbrush their photos and turn them into gods that they weren't. And so this is the tail end of that business is what I entered into, this kind of star making machine, this sell your soul to the devil, the Robert Johnson, sell your soul at the crossroads to the devil. That was the story that was told. And really only in the last 5 or 10 years have you seen that story dying. And now a new story is being told, where an artist like a Grimes, or, even Poppy, who just, who's a label mate, who just got, I think she was nominated, first solo female ever nominated for a Metal Grammy. You see this erosion of stereotypes and tropes. And now we're ending into the free form world, which musicians existed in for years and years and years, which was, there's an audience, and are they interested in what I'm doing?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And kind of removing the middlemen, so to speak.
Yeah, and when people lament to me, and I got to be sensitive around this because it does impact a lot of people, but when people lament to me the death of the music industry, I'll often say, well, it is very new. Like, we're not talking about the erosion of the record industry. I say we're not talking about the erosion of the Gutenberg printing press here. Like, we're talking about something that is a relatively new invention. It's going to change, and it's going to collapse like all industries do. This is not set in stone.
I think music is probably going through its reckoning, that very much the way the movie business went through in the late 50s and 1960s with the breaking down of the studio system. I'll be real quick about this because it's a really long thing. But, there's this thing in California called the 7-year law, which is if you're a movie actor, you can't be held under a contract for more than 7 years. But that law does not apply to musicians.
Really?
Yeah, because the movie stars, with their power and their political pull, were able to amend the law on a judicial level for movie actors, but not for musicians. And the Pumpkins actually sued under this law in 1995 because we were under a really long contract. It was kind of a groundbreaking case. Well, we weren't able to break that hold, and that hold still basically is kind of. There was some stuff about Paul McCartney about a year ago about these kind of laws, these draconian old laws that still apply to the music business that actually don't apply to the movie business in California. And this is what I'm saying. It's like I entered the end of that old kind of studio system thing where you were farmed and commoditized. And if you didn't, dance the way they wanted you to dance or sell the way they wanted to sell, they discarded you.
And you did well. I mean, you sold a bunch of records, and the Smashing Pumpkins had a tremendous cultural impact. They did.
Oh, trust me, we gamed the system. We absolutely gamed the system. We had no problem doing that.
You really, you figured it out? Like you sort of saw a system and you said, I think I know how to work within this?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's Chicago. I mean, that's the world I grew up in. They call it the hustle, right? We just hustle. We figured it out. Look, I'm not, this is not crying here, but it's not like we got good record reviews. It's not like we got good concert reviews. People talked about my hair or lack thereof, or my crooked teeth, or my guitar solos. Like, we didn't get the support that you would normally expect someone to get with our success. So we figured out the only way we were going to be successful was to game the system, because the hipsters weren't going to support us. Now, of course, they love what we did back in the day, but at the time, the hipsters hated us.
Can I ask how you did?
How I did what?
How you gamed the system?
Well, here's a perfect example. In our era, MTV, getting a video on MTV, And then what was it back in the day? It wasn't Much Music.
It was Much Music, yeah.
Oh, it was Much Music.
Yeah, it's not called Much Music anymore. Now it's just called Much.
Yeah. Getting a video was the preeminent way for you to get exposure and, of course, sell things, including tickets. So we figured out that by turning ourselves into characters on video, basically diminishing the band's role in the video. Like, bear with me for a second. 1995, almost every video was what? A band standing against a wall, intercut with a bunch of dumb footage. You know, something happened, something happened. Right? Yep. Like a bad little movie. We said, no, we don't need to be the band against the wall. In fact, we don't even need to be in the video. We're just going to make more interesting videos that are more visually stimulating and interesting and engaging. And our role in it doesn't need to be actually that valuable. And believe me, the record company fought like hell. They thought we were insane. How can you not be in your own video? Or how can you only be in your video 1/3 as all the other bands? We said, watch, it's a good idea, because we just want to make better little mini movies.
Yeah.
And we gained traction. And for a while we were a dominant band in the video medium, but it was because we were willing to put our goal ahead, which was we want to make interesting content that people will engage with, as opposed to use it how everybody else uses as some sort of star ego vehicle. And if you actually go back and look at a lot of old Smashing Pumpkins videos, you'll be shocked how little the band's in the videos.
Well, it leads me to the clip that I guess we'll end our time with today. Take a listen to this. This is the 25th anniversary of this record.
And cleanliness is godliness, and God is empty, just like me.
That is the, we'll call it the Q Mellon Collie Mega Mix. Some of the biggest songs from one of the biggest records of all time, Mellon Collie and the Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins, released 25 years ago this year. Billy Corgan, or William Corgan, is with me now. I know I don't have you for much longer, so I do want to talk briefly about this. Is, you know, when we talk about gaming the system for the success of the Smashing Pumpkins, not needing the hipsters and the hipster reviews, and not getting necessarily the support from the press, but one thing you certainly did was forge a real solid relationship with the fans, right? I mean, that's something we talked about in the lens of like a one-to-one relationship with a musician as it is right now. But let's talk about 1995. What is it that you tapped into back then with fans that led them to be so close with you, to be so loyal to you in a way that a lot of bands of your generation don't have that audience anymore?
You know, I don't really know. I know that's a terrible answer, but I don't know. It's like we stepped on a beehive or something, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know what it was about us in terms of identity. Maybe it was our mix of personalities. Maybe it was the fact that we were so self-deprecating in print.
You were kind of mysterious, you know.
Well, we played that too. That was part of gaming the system. You know, I mean, we used to go into interviews purposely kind of winding each other up and acting like we didn't like each other and all sorts of stuff. Just it was because it was like a stage. It was like another stage to play on. The thing I've heard from fans through the years, and the thing that they keep coming back to, is they felt like somebody was explaining their version of reality. Let's call it the suburban wasteland, which of course defines much of America. And I guess most of the world. I mean, I've been other parts of the world, and even the third world has their strip malls, you know. There's something about the strip mall, like my downtown where I grew up was strip malls and a McDonald's. You know, there was no old building to look at. There was no, Farmer Brown started here in 1782. There was none of that. It was just a suburban concrete wasteland. And then you went one town over and it was the same. And then went one town over and it was the same. So I somehow was able to tap into that gray feeling that gives you, this kind of like, it's weird. It's like, it's not anti-suburb, because, the reason my parents moved to the suburbs is they thought, quote unquote, we were going to have a better life. So the idea of like, my kids can have a yard and, that's behind that story wasn't so true. There was a lot of abuse. There were a lot of horrible things that went on that, people looked the other way on. Of course, now you have like things like, these horrible meth problems and stuff like that that pervade middle America. So if you're a kid growing up and you're just a sensitive kid and you're looking around and there's no way out, I think somebody explaining to you that they understand how you feel and they also looked out that window and saw there's no way out. Somehow that message really resonated. It wasn't done on purpose. I was just speaking about my own experience, but somehow it landed. It's probably as hard as anything I've ever done.
So how do you approach making a sequel?
Well, a few people ask this question, and unfortunately, they make the assumption that we're somehow going to try to recreate the musical landscape, which, of course, is not our way at all. The way I kin it is, it's like a story. You start one place, and then 25 years later, you land somewhere else. So it's these same personalities and characters landing in a different world. And just think, okay, if 1995 was part one and 2000 was part two, well, how much has the world changed since then, even since 2000? We've all been dopamine afflicted by our phones. We all deal with fake news. There's been such exposure in the last 10 years through whether you call it WikiLeaks or, the way the internet works, the dark web of, let's call it different sources of information, people talking about things like Q. I'm not a fan, but you know what I mean? It's like we've entered the world of shadow and, basically truth and non-truth. I call it the post-truth era, exists side by side. And then you have the old corporate kind of entities telling you, no, this is the truth, this is the narrative. And then people whispering around water coolers that they know that there's another story going on. It's the exposure, it's the same thing we've been talking about. It's the exposure of the old model against what, let's call it a new model. Patti Smith saying it, people have the power. And you're seeing a slow but very eddying return to people taking their own power and doing with it what they want. And hopefully, having some faith in humanity, they'll build a better world here. At times it looks like in America right now, it can look very, very bleak. But I hope that people will make the right decisions collectively, and we'll end up with a better planet and a cleaner place and a happier place that my children could grow up in. Because right now it seems like a maze, but it's been like that before, and it was like that for our ancestors, and they figured it out.
But hopefully a reality that we can agree on. I guess that's sometimes the thing that I'm hunting for is to trying to find a reality that we can agree on.
Well, this is the problem. In here I am talking to a mega media complex. This is the problem with people deciding what the truth is. Mm. You know what I mean? We're now at a point now where no one's going to get to dictate the truth. So maybe we're in the wild west of the truth, right? Where people are gaming the system for their own version. Like there was an article that came out about me today, right? just to make you laugh. It's a very good article. I actually enjoyed the interview. And the headline of the article is, Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins has a lot to say about Spotify and Courtney Love.
Oh, do you?
Not Billy Corgan's got a new album. Just so if you're looking at it like we all do, you're clicking through headlines. You see that headline. I'm not clicking on that. You know what I'm saying? It's got nothing to do with what's going on in my world, which is I have just put out a 20-song double album.
Yeah.
The band's doing great. Hey, middle pandemic, we're putting out music. We're trying to stay active. No, the headline is, I got a lot to dish on Spotify and then Courtney.
I'm sorry to laugh. I don't.
So what does that? And what does that tell? What does that tell a consumer? That the Smashing Pumpkins' new album is the third most important thing in that headline, and it didn't make the headline. That what I have to say about Spotify, who I'm not. I say some things in the article about Spotify, not necessarily negative. I actually like Spotify, but the point is, if you read that headline, that's what you think I care about. But I don't care about that. That's what I'm saying. So this is what I mean about, I can go to my fans every day and I can say, no, this is the reality of where I live. And then when I engage with the media complex, in this case, it was on Yahoo, they can do with it what they want, and they will. They turn me into a cartoon character or a source of a click. And see, what we have now is we have a growing tension between those two commodities. People's need for the truth and reality, which is, you said aptly, a truth that we can agree on, which I think most people really, really do want. I think most people really do want to live in harmony and just get on with it. And then this other thing that sort of has to say, no, we need our clicks. We're willing to subvert and alter reality because it's good for our model, and your culture and your sanity be damned.
Well, maybe it brings me right back to the best way to close things off, which is how I began it, which was I listened to the radio, I heard your song, And I whatever it was, I wasn't expecting it to be Smashing Pumpkins, and it was, because that's what Smashing Pumpkins sound like, contrary to what anyone says. Lovely to talk to you again.
Thank you, my friend.